Well, I wanted to have you on mainly for the Pistons stuff when a lot of the transactions were happening over the summer, but I've been following your writing as I do, and I really enjoy Matt's writing. Everybody's got to check him out. I'll give him a chance to plug it, but he's on Forbes, and he writes about a lot of varied interests, a lot of business stuff. The Steve Project of the Sports Project, our other show on the station, would like Matt because he's got a lot of business-oriented stuff. And I figure we'll probably start with this one because, as many of the listeners know, my background's in sports memorabilia, and I wrote the book, An Introduction to Sports Memorabilia. Matt just wrote an article about a card that when Matt published the article, it hadn't sold, but you'll have to give us the update, Matt, but I believe it has sold. But it was the logo man, the double logo man, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant signed card. They take two NBA logos from their actual jerseys, and then both of them signed it. And it's a one-of-a-kind. It's manufactured rarity, which is becoming a more popular thing for sports cards, sports card companies, which I talk about in my book. But it was interesting that you covered that. You talked to Heritage Auctions, which I've dealt with them a lot. Chris Ivey, the sports director over there. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that article and the card, and then take us through the story. And then I think I know the conclusion, but then where it ended up here.
Yeah, I mean, so just to kind of take like the average layperson kind of behind the curtain, when you do like, you work as an NBA writer and you have bylines and stuff on, semi-prominent websites, you always you get like 10 of these emails a day, basically, of like random people just emailing you about what they got going on, trying to get you to write a story. And most of the time it's like, you just don't have the time to do all that. It's not really that interesting. I would say maybe one in every 100 stories I get emailed to me is like, okay, wow, that's cool. Let me follow up on this. And then Heritage Auctions, of course, that was very, very cool, very interesting, good change of pace, especially where we are right now in the NBA calendar. I've been searching for stories to write. Right, it's not coming to me as easy as it usually does, but yeah, they told me about this card they have. It's basically until last week, I knew close to nothing about memorabilia. I still don't know very much. I know a lot more because, it takes a lot of learning and research to write these articles, but nowhere near as much as you do. But so yeah, basically it's a card, from what I understand, with Kobe, MJ on it, both their autographs, and both has pieces of both of their logo man jerseys. And since it has the logo man, there's only one logo man per jersey, the only one of its kind. When I talked to them, it was bidding at about $7.1 million with buyer's premium. And I got a text from Reeves over at Heritage Auction, great guy, sent me this, and I'll go word for word. The Upper Deck Exquisite Collection Dual Logo Man featuring Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant is now the most expensive sports card that has ever sold at an auction at $12.9 million, breaking Heritage's own record of $12.6 million for the 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card that sold in 2022 Summer Platinum Night Sports Auction. So the reason they reached out to me is because the card was going to be the highest selling card in basketball card history, right? Which is about, Steph Curry had a card go for $5.9 million, I think about 4 years ago. But what ended up happening is this card just shattered the all-time sports record. So it's really interesting, really cool story. Happy for everyone at Heritage Auctions. I'm sure it's great for their business to be selling stuff like that, right? So, but yeah, it was really, it was a privilege to tell a story.
It's a neat story, and I wanted to cover it since I do have the background there and everything. Do you know the history of the card, like how it was acquired? Because I was doing some research, but that was somewhat unofficial. But I was looking in some of the Facebook groups that I'm in, and I had seen some history, but I'm not sure if that was true. But it looked like it had maybe changed hands a couple times and was purchased for a lot less initially, and then now has gone for obviously a handsome reward for whoever ended up with it here.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with like the prior life of the card before it ended up in its current. I know that the Kevin Leary, is actually a part of the group that acquired the card. It was, by the way, again, card like this, not just acquired by like just a guy, random dude, right? It's a group of people trying to work to acquire it. I'm sure they're trying to eventually sell it in the future, but yeah, I'm not familiar with the prior life of the card.
It looked like it had maybe changed hands with a couple collectors and everything, but
Okay.
it's just interesting to see this, because now there is a lot of, you hit on it, Matt, there's a lot of investment now in these cards. These are implements that people are using for legitimate investments. I remember talking with somebody, I don't know if it was somebody from a different auction house, but they were talking about how that the move to the investment piece has really boosted the industry as a whole. And a lot of these Honus Wagners that go for over $1 million and cards like this, it's basically a buy and hold. And a lot of the vintage cards are moving that way. So it's just an interesting thing to talk about, especially given the memorabilia background and everything. I'm glad you covered that, because it's a good NBA story, and we got to do something in the off season here. There's other NBA stuff I want to discuss too, because you had a good piece about Duncan Robinson before we knew he was going to be on the Pistons. And there was an interesting juxtaposition of your writing. You did a very good in-depth piece, because I've been trying to say this on the show that I think people are underrating Duncan Robinson in comparison with Malik Beasley. If you take a step back to last year, before both of them had the year that they did, obviously Robinson's fit with the Heat was not quite as good. Beasley fits perfectly with the Pistons. He gets a lot of volume there. And I always wondered, when they acquired Robinson, I thought, well, okay, if they had reversed positions, what would his year have looked like last year? And now we'll get a chance to maybe see. There'll be other pieces and other variables. But that also pairs with your NBA free agent rankings or contract rankings, where even though initially you're kind of highlighting Robinson as a value, once the details were released, then that was a lower value. So I'm kind of curious where you land on him, and wanted to discuss the initial article on kind of his value, especially with the floor spacing and his improvements in other areas.
Yeah, I mean, I've really had an eye on Robinson since the 2023 finals run with the Heat, right? He, for a long time, was very similar to, a guy like Luke Kennard, Sam Hauser, just a spot-up three-point shooter. Can't really do much else on offense. And defensively, he'll just hurt you, right? And those players were starting to, become extinct in the NBA, because players are so much more skilled. Defensive tactics are so much more refined, right? You can counter a great three-point shooter by top-locking them or using fly-by closeouts to run them off the three-point line. And so once I saw in 2023 that he had really made an improvement as an off-the-dribble player, as a passer, as a driver, I was like, okay, this is interesting. And, he's tall. He's like 6'7", right? He's not a small guy. He's not like a Trae Young size or anything like that. So I'm interested. And so I will say three things can be true here, right? I think Duncan Robinson, one of the more underrated offensive players in the league, right? He's a very, very great shooter, one of the best shooters in history. Improved driver. I would say he's a better driver than Malik Beasley. Probably a better passer than Malik Beasley. Probably a better ball handler than Malik Beasley at this point. He's taller than Malik Beasley, right? So that's true. Another thing can be true is that if we had to, obviously before all of the gambling stuff, and it seems he's cleared of it, and all that stuff. But before that, right, we were going to be paying for Malik Beasley at like his highest value. We're buying high. You never want to buy high in this league. I mean, last time I was on, I talked all about how the important thing is to sell high, buy low, right? And while these are human beings, right, we still have to think about this as, like a salary cap and from a money perspective and from supply and demand perspective, right? Because that's just how the game works. And the thing about shooters, right? Shooting is something that just like, a great shooter can be 9 for 10 from the floor from three one day, and then the next day it can happen season by season, right? Last season, Beasley just shot at a historic pace, well above anything he'd ever shot before. And he's a great shooter. He has a history of being a great shooter. But what happens if he loses like 4% off of his threes for next year? Is he still as valuable? You know, how much does his value dip then? And we're paying a guy, right, this summer. He's at the apex of his value. We're not getting him at a buy low. So I think from that perspective, right, you get Duncan Robinson. He's probably only, you know, marginally better than Beasley, but we were going to have to pay the max for Beasley. Now, where the issue comes in, so I'm loving the deal, right? And then the issue comes in, I'm like, now you're overpaying Duncan Robinson, right? Whereas Duncan Robinson's probably like a, you know, what is it, $12, $13 million player, like a high-end bench player because of his limitations as a defender, right? Now you're paying him like 15, so you kind of lose. It kind of hurt me because I'm like, you know, I love this guy. I thought he was going to be like a low-end contract because he's getting bought out by the Heat, but because the Pistons agreed to a sign and trade, like it's just not that valuable of a deal anymore. So I know it's kind of confusing. You're like, you like Duncan Robinson, you don't like Beasley as much. Oh, you think Duncan Robinson's better than Beasley, but you're upset about Duncan Robinson's contract. And that's kind of the name of the game, right? It's not just about who you get, it's what you get them for, you know?
Oh, I completely understand. And I like, that's one of the reasons I like your writing. I'm a finance guy. I like looking at it that way, but I'm also very into the on the court product, and you address both pretty well. And it is interesting to compare that, say, to, I'm just going to kind of like pull a name out. Like one of the names that the Pistons were interested in was Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and he's a more varied player than Robinson. Definitely not the floor spreader and the distance shooter, although his splits are pretty good. But he's obviously a defensive kind of shut down guard, and he's got some other skills. He's got some playmaking and everything. And so he was in that same market, I think, cost-wise, granted with longer years, as Robinson. So when you look at guys that are more complete players or that relative value, then I can see you looking at it that way. But there's also the other side, that there's other people that are overpaid, and you've got to kind of fill those spots, and they're still in a good place overall. So it's just the nuances of it.
Exactly. So,
but yeah, that's
kind of where I'm at with it. It's a little bit of a complicated relationship.
Well, yeah, we all have those. So that's interesting. Well, yeah, I want to talk about Robinson a little bit more, but I want to talk about a couple of your other pieces, because you're hitting on a lot of Michigan notes. You've got a good piece on Blake Corum and a good piece on Jace Richardson. So we got something for both college fan bases after we take a break here. We'll come back with Matt Issa of Forbes. Stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM. Coming back here with Matt Issa of Forbes, talking about a lot of his recent articles here. He always has great stuff, and there was a lot of Michigan coverage. I know he's a Michigan State guy, so I think I'm going to let him finish with the Michigan State article. So we'll make him stomach the Michigan article here, because we try to cater to both markets, although we do cover more Spartan stuff on this show than we do Wolverines. No offense to the Wolverines fan base. It's easy to say with you on, but yeah, we get good coverage from the Spartans. Actually, one of the folks that we're trying to get on that was maybe going to be in this spot, or hopefully next week, is J.U. Callcrick, who's going to be calling the games here on the radio. Yeah. So we're hoping to get some more Spartans coverage. But this is an interesting one to start with here, because I find it interesting. Steve, who I referenced in the first segment, who hosts our other two sports shows, he covers NIL a lot more than I do. But you had an interesting article about Blake Corum, and this has always been, I remember when that documentary came out, I think it was called Broke, and it was an early 30 for 30, and it was about how 75% or so of athletes ended up with basically no money after 3 years. I don't know if I have all those particulars right, but something like that. And you talk to Blake Corum. I've heard this about him because we actually have mutual contact. I know the guy that runs Sack the Stigma that he does some work for, and he's told me about this, about Blake. So I'm glad you did an article covering this, because Blake has focused ever since he was on his initial NIL deal on investments, on saying, hey, I have a fixed amount of time, especially as a running back. Average running back, I think, is 4 years or something, and we've got to make this money and make this money work for us after the career. Because it's great that you're making more than the average person at the beginning, but it also has to last you a lot longer than the average person from a financial standpoint. So I'm curious. I read the article. It's a great article. I encourage people to check it out, but I'm curious on kind of your thoughts on it and the thought process there, as somebody that is a Spartans fan and came in talking to a guy that maybe wasn't your favorite in college, but it sounds like you grew a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, man, I really, to be honest with you, I kind of resented the guy for most of my adult life. But, no, I mean, like, just it speaks to the quality of character of this man that, I go into this interview and it's my job, right? Like, if I have the opportunity to interview somebody of his stature, his profile, to tell a story, right, like this, like, it's my job to do it, okay? And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't excited about the interview. It wasn't like, man, like, oh, I woke up. I don't know. Did you watch SpongeBob at all?
Not really. I was a little older for that. I did watch it some with some of the kids when I worked at the YMCA, but I don't really get it. But I'm looking forward to the reference, whatever it is.
Okay, so basically there's this episode like where they're like, oh, who eats a Krabby Patty at 3 a.m. right? And Patrick, they cut to Patrick and he, like, his alarm goes off 3 a.m. He turns out, he's like, oh boy, 3 a.m. And then he takes a bite of his burger. Like, I wasn't feeling like that, is what I'm saying, to interview Blake Corum. But, he quickly became a riveting conversation from this guy who clearly is just a very well-balanced individual, right? You hear so much, like, I think, just for talking to athletes, one of my biggest curiosities with all of it is, like, when you experience, like, such high highs as you would being at the top of your craft, right, around a sport that's, followed by millions and millions of people, it is hard to, find things in life to replace that sensation. But I think Blake has done such a great job with all the things he's doing off the field, whether it be real estate or trying to spread the wealth with the NIL money. Like, he's just done such a great job of being able to find that balance and ensure that he'll be well-adjusted to society once his playing days are over. But for anyone who didn't read the article, the main topic was that peak NIL, right? So when he was in college, right, he was one of the top athletes in the world. He was fortunate enough to earn a lot of NIL money, but he realizes, like, he doesn't work, like, so much harder than all the other kids in college, that he's the only one who deserves NIL money, right? And that if other kids had exposure, like, they would be able to get some too. And so what he would do is, like, for instance, right, Celsius gave him, I believe, $50,000 or $60,000 when he was in college to do some promotional tweets or Instagram posts. And with peak NIL, what they do is they'll take, like, 100 college athletes, right, combine all their social media followings and be like, here, all 100 of these people will do promotional tweets and Instagram posts, and split that 60,000 among them, right? So you're taking, like, people at mid-major schools from across all different sports, whether it be basketball, football, hockey, women's football, basketball, women's golf, whatever. Like, you know what I mean? Like, all these different sports. So he's basically, like, kind of trying to play a little bit of a Robin Hood role, and it's very admirable. And I think it's very cool. I think it was a story that was definitely worth telling.
Definitely. I liked the part about him trying to go back to the University of Michigan and talk to them about some of the housing situations there too, and try to improve that. So he's looking at it a very holistic view. I love the reference, by the way. Shout out to Bill Fagerbeck, who I think is the voice of Patrick Starr. He is a Tigers fan, so we'll be catering to him for the next segment where we're talking about the Tigers, because I know he's a Tigers fan. So we brought it full circle there, Matt. We brought it back around, but yeah, that was a great article. Make sure to check out all of Matt's writing and all the ones we're talking about. But I want to finish with the Jace Richardson piece, because that had to be, I don't have a good analogy for you with SpongeBob, but that had to be maybe what you were explaining. That had to be the opposite of it, because you were able to interview a guy that I thought I was kind of with you. I always thought he was somewhat underrated. I thought he was at the beginning because we tend to get on the potential of these young guys pretty quickly. And for whatever reason, it was slow to develop with Jace for being a legacy guy and a big name. And I thought you wrote a good article about him, and I'm very curious to follow his career now and see what he does, because usually we spend a lot of effort and resources on potential, and here I felt like he fell a little bit. But your article kind of highlights his that he does have a lot of potential, especially for a young guy.
Yeah, I think we can go on and on for hours and hours about like how general managers, it's so easy for them. And it buys them time, right? At the end of the day, these are people just trying to get a paycheck. I know they're passionate about the work, just like all of us are. But like, you know, they need jobs and money, right? It's important. It's part of society, and so it behooves them sometimes to like take these like raw prospects who are like, you know, 6'7", 6'11" wingspan, who may or may not work out with the right development, but at least it buys you like 3-4 years before you can figure out if they're really good or not, you know? So. But that's not a hero there. My sales pitch for Jace Richardson, okay, in his freshman season, if you look at his freshman season, compare it to all of the freshman seasons had by guards, since I think it was like 2005, you want to know who else like matches his numbers? It goes, ready? Yeah, James Harden, you know, and former 2-time MVP, right? Or 1-time MVP, whatever it is.
Right.
Trae Young, all NBA guard. D'Angelo Russell. He was an all-star, selected top 5, right? Marcus Smart, he is a former all-defensive player of the year, one of the best role players of the last decade. Lonzo Ball, who was, you know, on track to have a really, really good career as a quality role player before injuries slowed him down, but he's still playing well. Reed Shepherd, jury's still out on him, right? But he was a top 3 pick. Jace is the only player to ever put up like those level of numbers as a guard, freshman in college, right, and not be drafted in like, I think it was the top 6, right? So, I mean, that's a pretty good indicator right there, right? Him and I think it was him and Cooper Flagg were the only players to have only freshmen to have a box plus minus over whatever it was they had. I can't remember the top of my head, but like this guy was a productive freshman, right? And I understand a little bit of the size concerns, but he's pretty athletic. He's just so skilled. He, you know, his being a lefty, he might be able to kind of throw people off balance a little bit more. I think that'll be playing to his advantage, but I'm sold on the kid. Forget I'm not going to lie to you. He's probably my favorite player from the Spartans that I've watched in the last decade, but I also think he's very legit.
I thought you made a lot of great points in what you just said, and a lot of them are in the article. I think the Reed Shepherd one is the most kind of salient comparison to me, because we are going away from the smaller guards and we're trending towards bigger guards. And I get that. The Pistons obviously have Cade. That's working out well. You can put a smaller guard next to him and it frees up a lot. But with the prominence and how high people were on Reed Shepherd, it was weird to see the difference. I just didn't see that many differences, I guess, and I'm not a professional talent evaluator or anything, but I failed to see the difference between those two, and why one would be so high up, and now we haven't really seen him play. There's depth issues there. He's got to break through the depth chart, but I'm with you. I think there's good things coming for Jace. So I was glad you highlighted that, and I always enjoy reading all your stuff, but I want to make sure to give you a chance to tell the people where they can follow you and read your great coverage.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way to find my written work is just at Matt Issa 15 on Twitter. I usually tweet out most of my work. I'm over at Forbes, the analyst in sportscasting. But a recent little passion project I've been trying to do is build up my YouTube channel. Again, it's just basketball content, and my TikTok. Both of those are just Issa Hoops. That's my last name, ISSA Hoops. So if you could, subscribe, follow, whatever it is you please, that'd be a huge help. But I just do the same thing I do with my written content. Just analyze players, whether it be X's and O's, philosophical stuff, stats, money, et cetera, et cetera. But thank you so much for having me on. This was a blast.
Definitely. I'm glad we could do this. And yeah, I love your coverage. Keep it up and be sure to follow them in all of those places here. And we'll look forward to having you back on here when it fits.
Sounds good.
All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Take care.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall, DDS, Calder Financial Group, Grand Management, Rydan Investments, JH Realty Partners, and Encore Business Group. Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh airs live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern on Jethro.fm.
Stay informed and stay vigilant.